what exactly is a virtual tour, and it's we're going to be using a mixture of Google imagery, old pictures, and contemporary maps to draw a picture of the lives and the adventures of the men that we're going to be considering. We're going to take about 50 minutes for this. And as Ian has said, this is not an overview of the campaign at all. I'm not an expert on Gallipoli, nor indeed the Northwest, but this is going to be looking at the story of the local men and their communities. So I'm pretty much a facilitator for this, really. Finally, we're going to be very much looking at what the Gallipoli Association and its associations like the Fusiliers Association is doing to help keep the men living forevermore. And as Ian has said, this whole thing is built around 3 interviews that we did about 18 months ago now. So next, let's look at where we're talking about. I'm sure you all know what we're talking about where Manchester is, but we're going to be sort of zooming into that industrial northwest. And at the turn of the century, it provided an enormous pool of manpower for the army. We're not talking about the people on the wrong side of the Pennines, Bradford, Leeds, Sheffield, etc. This is the Oldham, Stockport, Liverpool, Blackburn area, provided famous regiments such as the East Lancs, the Manchesters, the King's Liverpool, and the Yorks and Lancasters. There are way too many stories and regiments to talk about, so we're going to be concentrating on 3 towns in the area. So that's Bury, Rochdale, and Salford. And that was a very fertile recruiting ground for the regiment that we're going to be following today, and that's the famous Lancashire Fusiliers. We start this evening going up the Roch Valley to a little town of Littleborough, and you can see it there. It's changed very little in 110 years since we'll be talking about. The railway and the canal ran alongside the old Roman road from Leeds to Manchester. And we're now going to start by zooming into what brought wealth and probably misery as well to the people of Littleborough. That's the railway station. And that's a photo from the 1950s, but you can see as we zoom out of that it's the town has changed. On the outside of it, very little. Obviously, industry has changed a lot. But we're going to start now with our first interview. And you conducted that, Ian, with John Rogers and Stephen Cooney. So I'll leave you for that.
Hello, I'm here at Littleborough Station near Rochdale to find out how the Fusilier Association Rochdale branch has been keeping the memory of Gallipoli alive. Good morning, gentlemen. Nice to see you.
John. Steve.
Okay, let's have a seat. Good morning. Would you like to just introduce yourselves, say who you are?
Yes, I'm John Rogers from the Rochdale Fusiliers Association. I'm the Treasurer and the Vice President.
Good.
And I'm Stephen Cooney, and I'm the Chairman of the Fusiliers Association Rochdale.
Good to meet you, and thank you for joining me today.
Yeah.
Tell us about some of the things you've been doing.
Well, let me start by saying why and how.
Yep.
Yeah. In 2015, the Rochdale Council put in a Gallipoli stone in the Memorial Gardens, and they had a wreath laying ceremony, parades, lots of people attended. And a little bit after that, Steve asked me if I could do anything to keep something going within Rochdale. So that's when I contacted yourself to see if we could do a number of things. And in 2019 we had a parade in Rochdale, and we actually worked with young people, did some training with them about Gallipoli, and we also did a wreath laying, and the children laid crosses and wreaths, and they were really involved, and it was really good to see that.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay. Now this bench, which we've come to see today, is to commemorate Michael Francis Murphy. Can you tell us a little bit about him?
Well, not much is known about him, simply because he was only 17 when he was killed. but it's indicative of a lot of the people around here. Simply because he worked in the mill, which was just down here, and unfortunately his house has disappeared now because there's a housing estate there now. He would have known this area very well because the station was here at the time. But he went to war. He was a terrier, right, in the Territorial Army, and they all volunteered when the war started for service abroad. And I'm sure some of them were just happy to get out the mill. But I feel it's a shame that not much is known about him, but what is known about him, he was killed, and that's a shame. And that's why we really want to keep his memory alive.
Yeah. And the Territorials were the first 6 Lancashire.
First 6 Fusiliers, yeah.
Lancashire Fusiliers, right. Okay, good. And can you tell us how you managed to get the bench here? How it was, how it's been installed, etc.
Yeah. Well, first of all, we needed to get some money. We approached the council. I said we have actually got well over £4,000 for it.
Great. Okay, and here it is. You've also managed to get a bench nearby for another soldier, to commemorate another soldier. Can you tell us about that one?
Well, again, he was only 17, and that's in another township. And that one, the only place we could put that was in the Memorial Gardens. And he was called Brinton Hollows. His house still remains, which is nice. But I've never had felt the need to knock on the door and tell them. It would be nice to think about in the future, but they might not be very happy knowing there was a young lad killed who lived there. But the only thing about that is we could only put it in the Memorial Gardens. And not many people are going to be seeing that, whereas this one is prominent and it's on a train platform, and lots of people going to work in the morning will be sitting on this. In fact, I've seen them sitting on it.
Yes, and the station that young man almost certainly used at times.
Absolutely.
Yeah, great. Okay, and do you have anything else planned to keep the memory of Gallipoli alive?
Yes, indeed. We're hoping to plant a Gallipoli oak. It would be nice if we could do it next year because it's the 110th anniversary. I was hoping it would be in before then. Steve and I wanted it done a lot sooner. But there's lots and lots of work taking place in that area because it's the cenotaph, which is right opposite the town hall, and they spent millions on doing that up. They've had a grant from Heritage Fund. They spent millions on the spent millions on the town hall, but they're also doing the area around the cenotaph as well.
Yes.
Which shows you just how much interest Rochdale have got, because they want to spend it on the area and the Memorial Gardens. We've had meetings about it, Steve and I, and they're going to put an oak tree in the Memorial Gardens at the right sort of place. The difficulty is that an oak is going to last for hundreds of years, so they've got to make sure that it's exactly the right place. They won't want something built there in a couple of, 150 years down and have it taken out. So we're happy to sit back to make sure it's in the right place.
Okay.
And then hopefully next year we can get it in.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much, Jonathan. Well done for all the work you've done.
You're welcome. Can I just explain a little bit more? I think that might be pertinent.
Yep.
First of all, the parade we did when you gave us some money.
Yes.
If you remember, we wanted some money for these.
Yep.
Which are bands for older people and young people. And this is in fact Steve suggested what should go on it. It says Rochdale Fusiliers Association, Gallipoli, 6 VCs before breakfast.
Yes.
Yeah. That wasn't the first 6.
No.
But it was the Fusiliers.
Yes.
So it's and what I think is really good, and what I always feel a little bit emotional about, when I first joined the association in the 1980s, we were in Bury and we did a parade for Gallipoli and St George's Day, and there was people who fought in Gallipoli in the front.
Survivors, yes.
And I was thinking about that last night, and I thought, I'll mention that.
Yes, right.
I don't think many people would have paraded with And also, let me explain a little bit about Rochdale, which I think is the dark satanic mills.
Yes.
let me explain about Charles Watkins. He volunteered for the Territorial Force, joining Rochdale, the first 6th, on the 7th of May 1913, so he was in before the war. He was one of terriers to volunteer to serve overseas for the duration of the war, and he was training in Egypt in 1914. And Charles was sent to the Dardanelles with the first 6th. He said it was a welcome escape from hard labour in the mill. I left school at the age of 15 to go work in a foul Lancashire cotton mill 12 hours a day. As a territorial soldier, I was mobilised at the outbreak of World War I and went abroad to the Middle East theatre of war at once. So the war itself was for me, and for most of us, a deliverance from slavery, and as such was a welcome relief.
Great.
Now, he wrote that after surviving Gallipoli.
Yeah, he survived, yes.
So what he's actually saying is that war was preferable to working in a factory.
Yeah. As many young men would have thought.
That speaks volumes to me.
Yes.
And can I also say, well done to the Gallipoli Association for keeping this alive, because I feel particularly sad that most people see the First World War as being the Western Front. And also, I mean, it was horrible, what they went through. But if we're not careful, Gallipoli will fade away. Just like the war in South Africa in 1900 did, in the Boer War. And again, that would be a shame, but I'm going to, along with Steve, work hard to make sure we drip feed this information over a number of years.
Great, thank you. Well, you've done a brilliant job so far. Well done, well done.
Excellent. Thank you, John Rogers and Stephen Cooney. And so we'll look at the unit they talked about there, the 6th Lancashire Fusiliers, Territorials, who recruited from Rochdale, part of the Lancashire Fusiliers Brigade, along with the 5th, who are based in Bury, and the 7th, and logically the 8th, who recruited mainly from Salford. This was part of a larger organisation, the East Lancashire Division of the Territorial Force, with the East Lancs Brigade, 4th, 5th East Lancs, 2 Manchester battalions, and then the Manchester Brigade, as you'd expect, 4 battalions of Manchesters. And these were peacetime organisations. Now, let's next examine the East Lancashire Division's path towards war. It was formed in part of the Territorial Force, part of Haldane's reforms. By mid-1914, it was due to go to Ireland to keep the peace there, but that proved not necessary. So what we'll now do is follow in the footsteps, probably, of Michael Murphy and Brinton Hollows as they marched from Littleborough down the road into Rochdale when they caught that call up on the 4th of August. And they've reported to the drill hall in Barron Street where they'd done their peacetime training. And these are 2 photos that come from the Manchester Evening News that show the 6th Lancashire Fusiliers on that march. So there's in all possibility that we could actually see our 2 young lads in these photos, but we don't know for certain. Once they're assembled, they went into training. Kit was issued, bayonets sharpened, and then when they were ready as a brigade, they went on to train as an entire division with the other 2 brigades. So the division assembled at Turton Training Area for exercises, and when it became clear from the huge scale of losses of 1914, the kind of expansion that the army would require, then it became obvious that territorials provide an excellent source of manpower to fight the war overseas. And here you see them going through their final training, and this is indeed the Lancashire Fusiliers as they got ready to go to war in September of 1914. On the 5th of September, the division had the dubious honour of being the first one ordered overseas. And of course, this led to a bit of a problem because the territorials weren't obliged to serve overseas. So the battalion had to be split in two. The first line was those who went overseas, and they were called the first line battalions, as you see there, and it logically follows through. The second line were those who joined later and those who were too old, who were unwilling or too young to serve overseas. We'll now follow Michael Murphy and Brinton Hollows with the approximately 15,000 men who made up the East Lancashire Division, initially by train and route march down to Southampton. On the 10th of September, they boarded the troop ship Saturnia and left the UK for an undisclosed location. After a week, they entered the Mediterranean, so it became patently obvious that they were not headed for the Western Front, but were indeed heading towards Egypt. And on the 25th of September, they arrived in Alexandria, and fairly soon after that, the division found itself taking up defensive positions along the strategically vital Suez Canal. In February of 1915, they had their first taste of action when they successfully fought off Ottoman attacks that came through the Sinai Peninsula. However, it fairly soon became obvious that they were going to be required to board again on the SS Nile. On the 2nd of May, they set sail and headed north from Alexandria through the Med towards the growing crisis that was the battle in the Dardanelles. They moored off Cape Helles 3 days later and then used requisition trawlers to ferry the men ashore. And this indeed is a picture of the first 6 lengths on the 5th of May of 1915. So once again, in all probability, Michael Murphy and Brinton Hollows are in this shot. Once ashore, they marched north through the ground run at such cost in the previous month until they arrived in the trenches south of Krithia, as it was then, or Alci-Tepe now, just in time, as I'm sure you know, for the Second Battle of Krithia. The original forces in that fighting were the French and the famous 29th Division, but by this stage they'd been suffered so many losses they were being reinforced by various elements such as the 2nd Australian Brigade, a New Zealand Brigade from Anzac, and from the Royal Naval Division, the 63rd Brigade. The Lancashire Division, the Lancashire Brigade took a supporting part in the Battle of Krithia. That was their first taste of fighting on the Gallipoli Peninsula. After that, the army did what it normally does, and on the 26th of May it carried out some reorganisation, and as part of the rebranding of the territorial divisions, the brigades got numbers. So the 125th, 126th and 127th, and the division became the 42nd East Lancs, probably much to the disgust of the terriers who valued their local connections so much. So let's have a quick reminder of what the division had done. Arrived in Egypt end of September, fought on the 6th of May, fought the Battle of Krithia. 26th of May became the 42nd, and then at the start of June they took part in the 3rd Battle of Krithia, and a couple of weeks after that they were relieved at Lemnos to make good all the losses they'd suffered, not just due to enemy action, but also to disease and wounding. After 2.5 weeks, they returned via V Beach to the front line. And this is where our story becomes a bit more personal. So there's the now 42nd Division moving up towards Krithia and taking its part in the line that's now been expanded by the whole Royal Naval Division. And I'm sure many of you recognise that's the Vineyard, and this is where the 42nd Division took its part in the line. Now, I've used some Western Front Association mapping. There is obviously Gallipoli Association mapping available, but this one's quite nice because it shows the actual map that was used a couple of weeks after this. It shows how the division divided its sector up into two, so you can have 2 brigades up on each side and then another brigade back in reserve. During that, this is all part of the hiatus before the third battle of before the Battle of Krithia Vineyard in early August, and 3 days after they arrived, then Private Michael Murphy was killed in action. Unfortunately, as John Rogers said, we know nothing about this, but this was all just part of line holding. There were no specific attacks during this stage. He just died. 2 weeks exactly later, then Brinton Hollows died of wounds. Again, no idea what caused it. It was just not recorded, but somewhere in the area of this map. And it was, again, no details of his death, but his was the only death from the Rochdale men, the first 6th, between the 19th and the 30th of July. So this is a relatively quiet period in the line. Because of this, both their bodies were recovered, and they're both interred in the Lancashire Landing cemetery, very close to each other in D102 and F118, as you can see here. And as John said, they were both aged 17. That's the end of our personal connection with the Terriers. So we'll take a look at what the division did next. Remained on Hellas until to the evacuation. Spent the best part of a year fighting in the Middle East. Then went to the Western Front, where it took part in 3rd Ypres, German Spring Offensive, and then the final advance to victory. Its losses during the division's losses during the whole Gallipoli campaign were 395 officers and 8,152 other ranks. And I've had a quick trawl through the Commonwealth War Graves Commission site just to find out the number of dead on the peninsula. So this doesn't take into account any of those wounded or those who died on their way back to the UK. So the 1st 5th from Bury lost 230 men killed. The 1st 6th, including our 2, lost 186. The 1st 7th from Salford, 223. And the 1st 8th, again from Salford, 238. So that is a total of 877, effectively the loss of an entire peacetime strength of a battalion. So terrible losses there. And now we're going to turn our attention to where those last 2 battalions, the 1st 7th and 1st 8th, recruited from. So going from the Littleborough and Rochdale area, down towards Salford. We're now going to go into what is now part of Salford, but wasn't then, to the town of Swinton. And this is where we're now going to hear from Glenn Croston, who is very, very sadly no longer with us.
Hello, Glenn. Lovely to see you.
Morning. You okay?
Yeah, I'm fine, thank you. We're here today in Salford to talk to Glenn about the Gallipoli board and a number of other things. And I'm going to ask you a couple of questions, Glenn. So the first one, you've done a lot of research on Salford and the First World War. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Well, I've done a lot of research on Salford, military history, First World War and subsequently. But it was whilst I was doing research on the Battle of the Somme, which the Salford Pals and Eccles Pals took part in 1916, that I came across more and more names of guys who fell during the course of the Gallipoli campaign, who had links to Salford. And the numbers grew to the point where I thought I should be focused on that particular group as well. And I was very surprised at the numbers.
Yeah. What were the numbers? Remind me of the numbers again.
Well, on the memorial board here, there are 494 men who have links to Salford. And when I say Salford, I mean Salford as we know it now, and not as it was then, which was much smaller. Yeah. So places like where we are now, in Swinton, was not part of the city of Salford back in 1915, but it's pretty much the central part of Salford, the city today. We have 494. Many of them are Lancashire Fusiliers and Manchesters, but we also have men from many other regiments and corps as well.
Yeah. Okay, good. Could you tell us a little bit about how the board came about and how it was installed and why here?
Yeah. Well, we're in Salford Veterans Memorial Garden. I asked for permission to put memorial boards in for different campaigns, so the people of Salford would have the opportunity to remember, pay respect to the servicemen lost in those campaigns. We have a board at the moment. We've got Gallipoli here. We also have one for the Far East Prisoners of War over there, and this year we did one for Operation Overlord D-Day. Right. The boards are all similar. This is the largest one. It has the largest number of names on it compared to the other two. So we did some fundraising, and I approached the council, showed them what I was offering, what the design would look like, with the text, had it all approved, and they gave us permission to install it last year, just before Remembrance.
Excellent, thank you. And have you got anything else planned to keep the memory of Gallipoli alive in the area?
Absolutely. I have approached the council. I would like this and the other memorial boards, so that on significant dates, obviously 25th of April for Gallipoli, we would be able to hold a small, short, informal remembrance service for members of the public who wish to come along. We had veterans come this year. I'd like to involve local schools. We've got two very, very close to here. We want to keep the memory alive. That's the purpose of all the boards, so that none of these guys are ever forgotten. We also have to remember that for many of them, they're not remembered anywhere else other than where they fell or very close by. And so for families, local families, and I have met some relatives of these guys, this is the one place where they can come to in Salford and they can pay their respects.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. We've moved further along in this magnificent memorial garden here in Salford. And Glenn, can you tell us something about the regiments that are represented here? The regiments that served in Gallipoli. Just give us a couple of examples.
Well, obviously the Lancashire Fusiliers, because locally, and it's well known they won their 6 VCs before breakfast. None of those chaps came from Salford. but we're all aware. And up in Bury, they make a big thing of it. Yep. But surprisingly, nothing in Salford. Manchester Regiment is the other local regiment, and they're represented on the board as well. And there are actually 4 men on that board who were all born in what we now know as Salford, who prior to World War I had emigrated either to Australia or New Zealand, and they enlisted there, and they also fought and died at Gallipoli, and they're remembered on our board as well.
Thank you, thank you. And these plaques, if you perhaps like to explain about the plaques and about the names on them, particularly the Gallipolians.
Well, this is the Public Veterans Memorial Wall, which is a different part of the project. And on here, anybody who had a connection to Salford and at some point in his or her life they served in one of the armed forces or the merchant navy in some capacity, their family can arrange to have a plaque put on the wall. Now, the 5 Lancashire Fusiliers, the 4 Lancashire Fusiliers and a Manchester Regiment chap on here, these were all killed in action at Gallipoli. And the reason they're not on the main board is that I had not been made aware of them beforehand. And obviously when the board's done, it's done. But having been made aware that they were also casualties at Gallipoli, then I arranged to have plaques put on this wall. So we do remember them. They're not going to be, they're not on the main board as I would have liked it to have been.
Okay. And so that makes all together from Salford, killed in Gallipoli?
We've at 501. There are 2 more that again missed off the board, but the family members had obviously come to visit the board and then not found the name, contacted me, gave me the details. I did the checks, and I satisfied myself that yes, there is that link to Salford, and they themselves paid for a plaque to be put on the wall. So that makes 7 on here, 494 on the main board, so we're at 501.
501.
And it wouldn't surprise me if there are more.
No, incredible sacrifice. Okay, thank you, Glenn.
You're
very,
welcome.
very interesting. And
You're
well
welcome.
done for the work you've done.
Thank you.
It's an excellent example of the kind of work that individuals are doing to keep the memory of Gallipoli, and indeed all First World War and people who fought for the UK alive. So we're now going to return to Salford proper for the final segment of our talk. And this is a rather different beast. It's one of Kitchener's new army divisions, K1, the 11th Northern Division, 3 infantry brigades with a mix of regiments from the north. You can see the numbers of the battalions there. Links straying a bit, South Staffs, and in the 34th Brigade, which we're going to be concentrating on, Northumberland Fusiliers, Lancaster Fusiliers, some Manchesters, and the 5th Dorsets, who I imagine could barely make themselves understood to everybody else and must have wondered what they were doing there. But the 9th Lancaster Fusiliers is what we're going to be considering next, and this takes us to our next interview. Oh, just before we do that, sorry. So these are people volunteering in Salford. They went on to do their training at Belton Park down near Grantham in Lincolnshire, and that's it being constructed in 1914. And in the fullness of time, they became ready to take their part overseas. On the 30th of June 1915, they embarked in Liverpool, and it very much following the same path as the 42nd, arrived in Alexandria, but on the 6th and 7th of August, they took part in the Suvla landings. So I think enough of them, and let's go on to our next and final interview.
Okay, I'm here with Graham Walker, a great friend of the Gallipoli Association, a local historian who's done a lot of research into a young man called Billy Unsworth. So Graham, could you tell us about the significance of the area we're in at the moment?
Yeah, this is Ordsall. It's a suburb of Salford. In 1881, when Billy was born, in Sunnyside Street, as it happens, it's just behind you, Ian. Sunnyside Street was a a back-to-back 2 up, 2 down terraced area. And to the east of where we are was West Dixon Street, a little further along, a few hundred metres, where that was his marital home. Basically his family and his wife's family, they were all from the Ordsall area, and Billy was from a large family. His brothers all served in the military, one being killed on the Western Front, unfortunately. But all the families were close. They all walked around the cobbled streets together, and whilst the lads were away, the families got together, and those that were left behind looked after them to a degree. But of course, a lot of the families were missing all the menfolk.
So this pub here behind us, over there rather, he had a connection with it, the Bricklayers Arms, I think?
I'm sure he did. We don't have a physical connection with the bricklayers. However, it was built at the end of the 19th century, early 20th century, so I'm sure he would have been in there on occasion. And of course, in the built-up streets of Salford, there was a lot of pubs, generally in the middle of the street, on the end of the corners. A place called the Barbary Coast, which is only 200 metres from here, which served a lot of the sailors from the ship canal, which of course was opened in 1894. So we had a very international area, really, serving a lot of the industry at the time.
And the canal bridge at the back?
Yeah, that goes over the little canal, and that takes you into Manchester. So where Billy signed up for World War I, he may have walked over that little bridge and walked into Manchester to sign up. Originally, Billy was in Gallipoli, in South Africa, 1901, 1902. So he served there for over a year, and he signed up in Bury. So for some reason he jumped on the train maybe, or got a carriage, or even walked it. He signed up in Bury because of course his father had passed away at a very young age. Life at home wasn't very good, and he decided he wanted to get away for a bit. I can understand that. So he signed up with the Fusiliers, and he went off to South Africa for the Boer War.
And Graham, can you tell us how you came across the story of Billy Unsworth and how you researched it?
Yeah, I'd wrote a couple of songs as an amateur sort of songwriter, and I was sat in my local in Monton with a friend of mine, Tony Gibbons, and he just asked me the question, how's your music going? Like you do, generally chatting. And I said, well, I'm looking for some letters, if I can find from a family or a person who I can write something on, maybe a song, a bit of local interest. He said he inherited some letters. Eventually it was about over 100 from his grandfather, and who he never met, but he'd come into possession of the letters, so he got them all together, and I had a look at them, and it was an amazing story of his grandfather, whose full name was William Franklin Unsworth, and of course Billy as William. I then put together a song after some research with some really good help from the Lancashire Fusiliers Museum up in Bury. They looked after me really well. So I wrote the song, The Ballad of Billy Unsworth. From that, more research, and I wrote the short story. And from there, we went to Salford University, who liked the idea, and they allowed us to exhibit Billy's story. Yeah, and then we hit COVID, and it went quiet for a while. And since then, I've picked out the short story. I reread it. I thought, this is well worth carrying on with. So hopefully we can do something with this little project and make the community aware of just what happened over 100 years ago here on this very spot, and how Billy Unsworth and his brothers came to all go to the World War I conflict.
Thank you. Billy served in the Boer War. What do you think made him join up for the First World War?
Well, after he came out of the Boer War, he got married at St Bartholomew's Church, which is only a few hundred metres from where we are. He started his family and he got a job at Glover's in Trafford Park. Local people know that they did the conduits for the pipeline under the ocean, and he became a brass turner at Glover's. And just behind me was a pub called the Greyhound, known locally as Nicky Burke's, after the landlord at the time. When the landlord died, his wife took over. It was still called Nicky Burke's. And on a Friday, once he'd finished at Glover's, he used to walk up here, call in for a pint at tea time before going home to the tea and help put the children to bed. And he walked in and there was 12 pennies on the table in the middle as he hung his coat up. And his mate was at the bar, and his mate looked at him and said, "Billy, you're joining the army." He said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, we've all been in here and we've all put some pennies on the table and it adds up to a shilling." He said, "And we said the next person that walks through that front door is joining the army, and it's you." So Billy had a couple of pints, went home, and the result was that his conscience led him to rejoin the Fusiliers, and then he went and joined the 9th Battalion, the Lancashire Fusiliers.
And was killed in Gallipoli.
Yeah, he actually went training, and he went down to Grantham. And from Grantham, after a good 6 months training the youngsters, he got 2 stripes because of his experience. And then they moved them down to Godalming in Surrey, Whitley Camp, which is probably just outside Southampton on the way there. And then he thought he was going to France, to be honest, because they didn't tell them where they were going. And they put them on a train. They went on a boat from Plymouth, and they sailed off. And the weather got warmer, so they weren't going to France. The penny dropped, and as they passed Gibraltar, they were told, "Look, you're going to Alexandria." So the lads were going to Gallipoli when they landed in Alexandria, and they went over to Lemnos via Mudros Harbour. And on the 6th of August, they landed at Suvla Bay, and they were challenged with taking Hill 10. With the Manchesters as well. They were a little round there, the 10th Manchesters, of which his brother was in there. And as far as I'm aware, they didn't meet in there. His other brother Henry was there as well with the Munsters, and he was actually on the SS River Clyde. The Trojan horse, if you like. And they were in a bit of attrition for 3 weeks. And on the 21st of August, instead of retreating, the commanders decided that they were going to have one last go at taking Scimitar Hill, which of course was really a hard task.
Yes, of course.
And it didn't work. They didn't get past Scimitar Hill. There was some hard fighting. Billy was killed. And a letter back home suggests that Billy was killed and crawled into a little hut where the Turks set it on fire because there were a lot of scrub fires, and he was never seen again. So Billy died on the 21st of August 1915 on Scimitar Hill in Gallipoli.
Okay. Thank you very much, Grant. Thank you.
I think it's remarkable the amount of research that these local historians doing that it just certainly took my and Ian's breath away. The dedication of people keeping the memory of these people alive. So I think that's an amazing story. And if you want to know more about the Ballad of Billy Unsworth, then Ian and Graham did a talk that's available through I believe it's the YouTube channel. I'm sure Ian will recommend me, but it'll be on the Gallipoli Association website. Next, what we'll do is we'll follow Billy Unsworth and the 9th Lancashire Fusiliers as they go to war. So it's all part of the Suvla landings on the night the 6th and 7th, with the 9th Corps under the dubious leadership of Stopford 11th Division, Northern Division there with landing 32nd, 33rd and 34th Brigades. And I'm sure you know much more about the chaos and the confusion of the landings than I do. We do have a picture of that. And this is probably on B Beach, just due to the terrain, but this shows troops of 9 Corps, so it may well have elements of the 11th Division in there. What we can see is from the confused fighting around Hill 10 and the gradual and slow movements of the troops, and a skillful fighting of the Turks and a skillful fighting withdrawal, 3 battalions of Ottoman troops managed to stave off about 20 battalions of the British. After a week, the front line had stabilised, and this is the situation. On 15th of August, then Stopford was sacked. De Lisle from 29th Division took over. Hammersley was sacked. Fanshawe took over the 11th, and they moved into the ground, as Graham said, just south of Chocolate Hill. 29th Division came up from Hellas and took up positions. Anzac, 1 brigade of Anzac came up, and 2nd Mounted were the reserves. The plan was to take out the high ground Scimitar Hill, the W Hills and Hill 60 as the last chance to reinvigorate the landings and to link up with Anzac just to the south. We'll now follow, now zoom into the area where the 9th Lancashires were going to do their fighting. So there's the 34th Brigade, and from the War Diary, on the 21st of August, the 9th Lancashire Fusiliers were holding this line, and they had to advance about 450 yards up towards the W Hills, which you can see there is Ismail Oglu Tepe, and you've got Chocolate Hill and obviously Scimitar Hill just up to the north. Well, now do is a bit of Google Earth. We'll follow the 9th Lancashire Fusiliers journey just in the 3 weeks they spent up to this stage. So here's the landing on the wrong side of the cut on the night of the 6th and 7th. Eventually, they managed to take Hill 10. And then came the long march down to the south, past the Salt Lake that you can see there, past Chocolate and Scimitar Hills, and finally 3 weeks later, here's their start line, with that W Hills in the distance at the top left, and this is the 450 yards that they had to cross. So somewhere in that land, that's where Billy Unsworth was wounded, crawled into his shed and was probably burnt to death. Because he was burnt to death, there's no known body, no known grave. So he, along with so many others, is commemorated on the magnificent Hellas Memorial. And it's obviously not very far from there to the Lancashire landings, where Michael Murphy and Brinton Hollows lived. So, after the Battle of Scimitar Hill, then the 11th Division was evacuated to Egypt. In mid-1916, it went to the Western Front, where it fought at the Somme. Then 3rd Ypres in 1917, and funny old thing, 1918, German advance, and then the final advance to victory. Disbanded in the middle of 1919, having suffered 32,165 casualties for the entire division. So that's roughly twice the number of men you'd have in a peacetime division. So you can see the degree of suffering there. The 9th Lancashire Fusiliers themselves in Gallipoli suffered 219 dead. 118 of those come on the 21st of August alone. So, in summary then, we followed the 42nd East Lancashire Division, especially the 125th Brigade, who left 877 Lancashire men on the peninsula. We also followed the 9th Lancashire Fusiliers, of 11th Northern Division, who lost 219. But another Lancashire Fusilier served there, none more so famously than the 1st Lancashire Fusiliers, who, in return for their 576 dead on the peninsula, claims 6 VCs. Other northwestern regiments certainly fought there, so a whole slew of Royal Lancs fought in the Anzac area with Royals, East, Southern and Loyal Lancashires. And what we'll do now is we take a last look at where Michael Murphy and Brinton Hollows died, in the killing grounds just south of Alchitepe. One last look at Scrubby Hill Lands, where Billy Unsworth burned to death. And all these men served, and many were died or wounded a long way from home in the northwest of England. And it's to there that we return to finish. And equally, as we celebrate the memory of those men who died so far away, it's important to understand that people are putting a lot of time and effort into making sure we remember those young men who died. So, for example, we've seen in Littleborough the excellent work that the Lancashire Fusiliers Association, the Fusiliers Association, is doing with John Rogers and Stephen Cooney's memorial bench. Into the heart of Ordsall in Salford, where Graham Walker is keeping the ballad of Billy Unsworth alive, and to the excellent work that Glenn Croston did before he unfortunately died last year in what is now the Salford Veterans Memorial Park. So we have from those young men having volunteered, whether it's Kitchener's Armies or Terriers, that they're now remembered by official memorials, but also the excellent work that individuals do in support of and supported by the Gallipoli Association to get such lengths so that we ensure that we will remember them.